Every character in Kaiju No.8 carries a story, but when you line up their paths side by side, you start to see which backstories actually shaped the war against Kaiju. First, let's take a look at the protagonist, Kafka. What if your own backstory was the only thing keeping you from being the blandest protagonist in shonen history? Because, honestly, without it, Kafka Hibino might not even qualify as a main character. He isn't your typical anime hero. He's 32 years old, worn down by years of failure, and stuck in a dead-end job, cleaning up kaiju guts after real soldiers do the fighting. His goofy smile hides the truth. He gave up on his dream a long time ago. That dream started in childhood. After watching kaiju wreak havoc on his home, Kafka and his childhood friend Mina Ashiro swore they'd join the defense force together. Mina made it. Kafka didn't. He was too weak, too slow, and after failing the exam again and again, he finally gave up. And that's what makes his backstory sting. He wasn't destined. He wasn't special. He was a dropout. Until fate handed him a get-out-of-jail-free card. A random insect kaiju crawled inside him, turned him into Kaiju No.8, and overnight he went from washed-up janitor to overpowered monster soldier. And that's where his motivation comes in, or rather, the lack of it. Kafka's driving force is basically, I want to stand beside Mina. That's it. Compared to Kikoru's trauma, Reno's desperation, or Hoshina's obsession with strength, Kafka's entire goal feels paper thin. So while his backstory gave him just enough depth to keep him interesting, it also highlights his biggest flaw as a protagonist. Without Mina, there's not much left to fight for. So let's talk about Mina. What if the backstory you carried was more important than anything you actually did in the story? Because for Mina Ashiro, that childhood promise with Kafka is basically her whole character. On paper, Mina looks like one of the coolest figures in the series. She's tall, commanding, captain of the 3rd Division with a 97% compatibility rate. She's cold, serious, and armed with one of the best ridiculous weapons in the Defense Force arsenal. A giant anti-kaiju cannon built just for her. With it she can snipe monsters from 20 kilometers away. And all of this ties to her backstory. When her and Kafka were kids, they promised to join the Defense Force together. But unlike him, she didn't quit. We get glimpses of her struggle, the training, the effort, the discipline that pushed her all the way to the division captain. Even trapped in No. 9's illusion, it's her memory of that promise that shows how deeply it drove her. And here's the problem. That's where Mina's contribution basically ends. Outside of a flashy intro snipe and getting kidnapped by No. 9, she doesn't really matter to the plot. She has no growth arc, no deep payoff, no emotional resolution beyond being the object of Kafka's obsession. Mina was built up as the sharpshooter powerhouse of the series. But in execution, she's more of a trophy than a character. Defined not by her own story, but by Kafka's. Next up, let me tell you about Kikoru Shinomiya. Unlike Kafka and Mina, Kikoru actually had the kind of backstory and drive that made her feel more like the real protagonist. Now, honestly, she did carry more MC aura than Kafka ever did. She was introduced right at the start, taking the entrance exam alongside Kafka and Reno, and she stood out instantly. Her compatibility rate, her combat skills, her sheer confidence, she was operating on a completely different level. Where Kafka bumbled through, Kikoru dominated. And her attitude wasn't just for show. Even on the brink of death, she refused to back down. Like during the aptitude test when she took on the Hanju head-on. That iron willpower had roots in her backstory. She was born into the Defense Force legacy. Her father, Isao Shinomiya, was a supreme commander. Her mother was a former numbers weapon user who died in the field. Kikoru grew up caught between extremes. A father who treated her like a soldier in training, and a mother who spoiled her with love. When her mother died, Kikoru's resolve hardened. She promised herself no one else in her unit would ever die on her watch. And unlike most characters in Kaiju No.8, her arc actually paid off. In her fight against No. 15, she confronted her own trauma head-on, broke through her fear, and grew stronger. With high compatibility and the rare ability to wield multiple numbers weapons, Kikoru quickly became one of the most promising fighters in the entire Defense Force. She had the skill, the backstory, and the growth that Kafka should have had. Up next, I have Soshiro Hoshina. Imagine being built like a Demon Slayer character, but dropped in a world where everyone else just pulls out a gun. That's Soshiro Hoshina, a swordsman designed for Attack on Titan, trapped in Kaiju No.8. Right now, he is known as Mina Ashiro's right-hand man. the swordsman who cuts down kaiju at speeds most soldiers can't even track. While everyone relies on guns, in the defense force, Hoshina wields dual blades and takes monsters head on. Later, he even forges a bond with Kaiju No. 10, weaponizing it into his own personal armor and strategy upgrade. In the present, he's one of the most reliable and dangerous humans alive. But rewind, and the picture changes. As a kid, Hoshina was always the other one. His older brother Soichiro overshadowed him in skill and strength. His father and superiors dismissed him because he couldn't master firearms. Over and over, he was told to give up on the defense force, that swords had no place in this modern war. And that's what makes his arc sting with irony. Hoshina wasn't supposed to be here, but he forced his way in, refined his swordsmanship, and proved that his style wasn't outdated, it was indispensable. That tenacity, stubbornness, and refusal to bow down turned him into one of the strongest warriors in the series. Coming up is Reno Ichikawa, who had all the makings of a second protagonist. So why does it feel like his story was left unfinished? Reno's backstory should have made him the grounded heart of the series, the ordinary guy who clawed his way into greatness. But he ended up more like a supporting character in his own arc. Right now, Reno stands as one of the Defense Force's most promising rookies. He's sharp, brave, and loyal to a fault. He specializes in ranged combat with his rifle, delivering precise shots and adapting under pressure in battle. His crowning moment came when he was chosen to wield Numbers Weapon 6, a weapon so powerful that it almost consumed him. But with Iharu's support, Reno pushed through, froze the battlefield and destroyed a kaiju core. That should have marked his rise from rookie to legend. But to really get why that mattered, you have to rewind. Reno didn't come from a famous family or inherit legendary genes. He was an ordinary boy who saw what kaiju could do and decided he wasn't going to sit back. Before joining the force, he worked the same dead-end cleanup job as Kafka. But unlike Kafka, he never gave up. In fact, he was the one who pushed Kafka to keep trying, practically dragging him back towards his dream. That's what made him feel so important early on. Reno wasn't just Kafka's sidekick. He was framed as another perspective, another route into the defense force. And somewhere along the way, the series shoved him into the background. His biggest spotlight came with Number 6, and even that felt like a late attempt to remind us he existed. Next is Kaiju No. 9, the antagonist of the series. What happens when your main villain's backstory looks more like the real protagonist than the hero himself? From the moment No. 9 appeared, he felt different. Unlike ordinary monsters, he wasn't a mindless beast. He's cunning, manipulative, and capable of disguising himself inside the Defense Force ranks. He regenerates from wounds that should kill him, twists his body into weapons, and most dangerously, absorbs humans and kaiju, stealing their strength and even their very identities. The most chilling power was, every time he evolves, he comes back stronger. That's also how he rose to his most horrifying form, after consuming Defense Force Commander Isao. But let's rewind. No. 9 wasn't this powerhouse from the beginning. It actually had a baby form, like it was the same size as a toddler. The only ability it had at the time was the ability to consume and evolve. Its intelligence was the only thing that kept him in check. Unlike other kaiju, No. 9 was very aware of its own weaknesses from the start. It knew that it couldn't handle humans and their power, so it stayed behind the scenes, hiding itself and its curiosity to understand humanity, until it met the Mireki era Mega Monster. After fusing with it, No. 9 took action, and we all know what happened next. Finally, let's talk about Insect Kaiju. A creature born from emotions, from fault line energy, from samurai spirits. Honestly, I don't think even the author knows what creates a kaiju anymore. On the surface, Insect Kaiju looks harmless. A tiny winged larva with stubby arms, a long pointed tail, oversized eyes, and sharp teeth. Small enough to crawl inside a human. But that's what makes it terrifying. Because this little creature chose Kafka Hibino as its host, turning up a washed up janitor into the most dangerous weapon humanity has ever seen. Unlike most kaiju, Insect Kaiju isn't mindless. It's intelligent, strategic, and surprisingly protective. It only lashes out at other kaiju, acting like a guard dog fused to Kafka's soul. Inside Kafka's mind, its presence grows. First, just a small head, later looming larger as its influence deepens. But where did it come from? That's where things get messy. According to the story, it was born centuries ago during the Mireki era, when samurai fell to a massive kaiju. Their rage and regrets fused into a heart that became the larva. Later, it supposedly hid in the dragon veins of the earth until finding Kafka. But this explanation clashes with the other lore about kaiju being spawned from fault line energy. So which is it? Science or spirits? Rage or radiation? That contradiction is what makes Kaiju No.8 so fascinating, confusing, or frustrating. On one hand, it's the ultimate narrative device, a tiny parasite that carries centuries of human resentment, giving Kafka a shot at redemption. On the other hand, it breaks the story's own rules of what kaiju even are. But no matter what, the insect kaiju did turn a wimp into an OP MC in just one panel. And that made Kafka unleash and evolve into so many forms that helped him and No.9.